I caught you cheating, Susan. I had just returned from a business trip when my mother-in-law suddenly came at me with a triumphant grin. Cheating? Having no recollection whatsoever, I had no choice but to echo her words. She probably thought I was playing dumb. Her voice got stronger as she continued in a tone as if she were closing in on a culprit. I had a hidden camera set up in the car. Lately I've noticed some things left behind that don't belong to our family. They're men's belongings, and not just once, but several times. I've been suspecting that a man, other than a family member, has been riding in our car. That's why, when you took the dashcam for repair, I was convinced. You tried to cover up evidence under the guise of repair, didn't you? And then, you conveniently mentioned going on a business trip. You've been with your affair partner all this time, making sure you won't be caught on the dashcam. But unfortunately for you, I had my own camera set up. I'm sure everything has been captured on it. There are 2 cars at my in-laws' house, and one of them was used by everyone living there, which included me. The car that is for everyone's use is equipped with an interior dashcam that records details of things that take place both on the road and inside the car. My guess is that my mother-in-law had it set up in an attempt to gather evidence of my infidelity. That's why when I sent it for repairs, she immediately assumed that it was to conceal evidence. I was at a loss for words. My mother-in-law has set up a dashcam and has accused me without even bothering to check what she has captured, all to prove her theory of me having an affair. Why does she suspect me to this extent and confidently assert that I'm cheating? It was most likely because I used to work as a hostess at a hostess bar during my college days. My family was not wealthy, and so I worked as a hostess to earn money to pay for my college tuition. My parents suggested I apply for student loans, but I declined as I heard they can take several decades to pay off. Working as a hostess was a good job for a college student. It may not have the best reputation in society, but because it didn't interfere with academic pursuits, but provided valuable social learning experiences, the job had advantages for students. I had flexible working hours, working mainly at night, and so I was able to plan around my classes and other extracurricular activities. Socializing with men in their 40s and 50s also provided me with opportunities to learn about economic structures and various aspects of different industries. In fact, the knowledge I gained while working has been useful in my current job. I was still a student working as a hostess when I started dating my husband, Mike. It was he who saved me when a drunk customer who had followed me on my way home tried to take me to a hotel. Mike understood my job, and he was okay with it. After graduating from college, I started working at the same company as him, although in a different department. Mike was always hesitant to tell his family about my days working as a hostess, saying that his mother had conservative views. You don't work as a hostess anymore, so you don't need to mention it to them yet. If we decide to get married, I'll tell them myself. I agreed with him, and we continued our relationship without disclosing my past to his family. However, Susan, is it true that you used to work as a hostess at a hostess bar? One day, we were visiting Mike's parents over the weekend. This was before we got married. Mike's mother began to speak, once the 2 of us were alone in the room. There's no way I can allow a woman like you to date my son. You need to break up with him and get out of his life immediately. Hold on a moment. I'm not the type of person you imagine me to be. I used to work at a lounge, just serving and entertaining clients over drinks, nothing more. Be quiet, you filthy woman. His mother raised her voice hysterically and pounced on me. Just then, Mike returned. Mom, what's going on here? As he stepped between his mother and me, he looked at us, alternately, saying, Calm down and talk to me. This woman was a hostess, did you know? Yeah, she used to work at a lounge, just sitting next to clients, serving drinks, and having conversations. I knew that. So why didn't you tell me? Mike sighed deeply. Because I knew this would happen. I was waiting for the right time to talk to you about it. How did you find out anyway? With some hesitation, his mother replied in a faltering tone. Melissa started talking about how she wanted to work as a hostess to earn money. She apparently came across a top all-time popular hostesses article online and found Susan. Melissa is Mike's younger sister. She's into flashy things, has a tendency to change boyfriends frequently, and definitely fits the typical image of a hostess in general. So it's okay if your own daughter wants to become a hostess, but it's not okay for anyone else? As Mike spoke with a mixture of exasperation and disbelief, his mother's voice grew shrill. I never said it was okay for her. How rude. But you didn't scold her like this, did you? Well, when you brought this woman here the first time, I thought she was a respectable young lady, and I was relieved. I didn't know she was a filthy woman. She deceived us. Susan is indeed very responsible. She worked as a hostess to pay for her tuition, not for mere leisure like Melissa. She didn't neglect her studies and quit right after she graduated. She even secured a position at a reputable company. Her performance at work is even better than mine. At these words, his mother clenched her lips in frustration, while I was deeply moved. He stood up for me as I was being condemned. But I couldn't help but feel concerned about the deteriorating relationship between myself and the woman who could become my mother-in-law. Just as I was contemplating the challenges of marrying Mike, despite my love for him, he surprised me with a proposal. But what about your mother? She would absolutely be against us getting married. Don't worry about her. My dad used to take his clients to lounges with hostess services for business, so he understands. He actually helped me convince my mom. Really? Absolutely. While I was skeptical, Mike was full of confidence. I couldn't quite shake off my anxiety, but still I chose to trust him and nodded in agreement. Our plan was to find a place for the two of us to live together after getting married. Mike, being the second son, always joked that if anyone should live with their parents, it should be the eldest son. His older brother wasn't married at the time but had a fiancée, and so I naturally assumed they would be the ones to move in with my in-laws. But then, we'd rather have Mike live with us. To my surprise, my mother-in-law, who had previously belittled me and criticized me as the filthy woman, was the one who brought up such a proposition. I couldn't fathom her intentions, but since we had already pushed through with the marriage against her wishes, I couldn't refuse. When Mike voiced his worries, asking if I was going to be okay, I confidently assured him that I was going to be fine. Shortly after our marriage, we began living at Mike's parents' house. Our newlywed life consisted of living together with my in-laws and sister-in-law. Melissa had actually gotten married a little before us, but her husband was immediately assigned to an overseas business trip, so she remained at her parents' house. Just like Mike said, my father-in-law was understanding and treated me kindly. It helped that I had experience conversing with older men, so our talks were quite engaging. My mother-in-law didn't seem to approve of that aspect of me either. She's just fooling you, dear. I could hear such backbiting quite frequently. She spread rumors in the neighborhood about me being filthy, and when she saw the designer items I had received during my days as a hostess, she would make snide remarks about my spending habits. At first, Mike and my father-in-law would scold her, but the shrewd woman eventually started to harass me when they weren't around. Hey, since you're so extravagant with your spending, you shouldn't be keeping money around. Just leave it all to me, and I'll manage it for you. She had the audacity to come to my room and say that. It left me dumbfounded. I'm not wasting money. These designer items aren't recent purchases. Plus, if I were to entrust anyone with my money, it would be Mike. You're just deceiving Mike. Even if you gave it to him, you'd just pester him for money and end up spending it all. I should be the one to hold on to it. Besides, the other day, I saw you coming home after drinking with a man. You really have a thing for men. That man was my boss. If you work for a company, it's natural to occasionally socialize over drinks, isn't it? Always making excuses. Just hand over your money to me. I was at a loss for words, but because I'm not someone who spends a lot of money in the first place, it wouldn't inconvenience me much, even if I were to give her a portion of my salary. So I replied, I guess I could give you about half of my salary, but remember, it's my money that you'll be managing, so don't use any of it. How could you say that? You are really rude. That's how I ended up giving half of my salary to my mother-in-law each month. She would come to my room to collect my salary each month, perhaps to keep it a secret from Mike and my father-in-law. Melissa, my sister-in-law, was more favorable towards me. She would approach me in a friendly manner and ask about my days as a hostess, or seek advice on her friendships. I appreciated her being friendly with me, but it wasn't exactly comforting. given that she was far more reckless with her money than me, but never got scolded for it. Plus, I've noticed that she's been occasionally taking and using my personal belongings without permission. In the beginning, she quietly borrowed them and returned them, but eventually, she stopped returning them. My mother-in-law's behavior was escalating as well. She would follow me when I went out on my days off, and if I spoke to a man at all, she would take photos claiming it as evidence of infidelity. She'd show these photos to Mike and my father-in-law, insisting over and over again that I was having an affair and that I should be kicked out. "I want to trust you." After being shown evidence of infidelity by my mother-in-law for who knows how many times, Mike spoke to me with powerless words that seemed to contradict his true feelings. "But the number of photos my mom brings to me, isn't it excessive? Have you been meeting men behind my back?" "No way," I interrupted him out of shock. "Your mom takes photos of random people I bump into or people asking me for directions. Strangers I absolutely don't know." "Yeah, you're right, sorry." Mike's voice lacked energy, and I didn't feel he fully believed me. Melissa would buy into everything my mother-in-law said, often commenting, whether maliciously or not, "Susan, you really have a lot of men wrapped around your finger. That's amazing." Her words seemed to be taking a toll on Mike as well. My mother-in-law's boast about having caught me red-handed came amidst this ongoing tension. "I finally got definitive proof of Susan's infidelity." With that, she summoned my father-in-law, Mike, and Melissa to watch the hidden camera footage with her. I knew everyone was suspicious of me. Due to my mother-in-law's outrageous behavior, even Mike started to think I might be cheating. But just as strongly as my mother-in-law insisted on her evidence, I had absolute confidence that I hadn't done anything wrong. And at that moment, only I knew about the shocking footage that was about to disappoint my mother-in-law's expectations greatly. My mother-in-law pressed the play button. Immediately, the inside of the car was projected on the screen. Everyone except me held their breath. What appeared on screen was in fact Melissa, indecently dressed and flirting with a man. That's right, I was the only one who knew about this. The man's belongings that did not belong to the family, as my mother-in-law had put it, were the belongings of Melissa's lover. "What? Wait, what's going on?" My mother-in-law spoke so fast and pressed the pause button on the remote several times, but perhaps due to her panicking, her fingers couldn't actually press the button, and the image of Melissa in disarray continued to play. Melissa's voice filled the room. "Stop it! Turn it off!" she cried out in a voice filled with anguish, on the verge of tears. Why did this happen?" But Melissa deleted all the footage from the dashcam. When I opened my mouth, everyone turned to look at me. Clearing my throat, I continued. "Earlier, your mother didn't mention that this footage was from her hidden camera. You let your guard down because you thought you had deleted your own affair from the dashcam, leaving only mine." Melissa, with a look of despair, directed her gaze towards her mother. "Why would you put a hidden camera? That's awful. It's like you're spying. If you wanted to capture Susan's infidelity, you should have at least told me about the camera. And why didn't you check what was being recorded? I can't believe this." Those words sparked anger on Mike's stunned face. "What the heck? You're okay if Susan is the victim of a hidden camera, but not you? Cut the crap." "It's okay, Mike," I said and continued. "You know, Melissa, dashcam data is usually stored on a memory card and can be recovered even after being deleted. The dashcam was acting up, and because I knew that you'd been deleting things, I had it restored while it was being repaired, so your affair is recorded on the dashcam too. Oh, and obviously there's nothing of mine. I never cheated." Tears welled up in Melissa's eyes as she stared at me. Why would you do this to me? We were getting along so well." "Normally, you don't just take things that belong to someone you're close to, do you? And didn't you, along with your mother, keep saying that I was having an affair? If it really was a relationship based on mutual respect, we wouldn't do such things to each other. It's only natural to be angry if someone does that." "I didn't take anything without permission." Melissa passionately argued to the point of straining her voice, but such lies won't hold up. "Yes, you have. I even have evidence. You didn't notice the hidden camera in my room that has been set up for a long time now, did you?" Yes, for a long time. I could see my mother-in-law's body tense up at those words. a smile crept up on my face. Well, it looks like you finally figured it out. It's captured on camera the day you came to my room and accused me of being extravagant with money, demanding that I hand over my salary. I even have footage that shows you coming to my room every month to collect the money. My mother-in-law's face turned deep red. That's because you squander your money. I was just holding on to it for you. So where is all this money you've been holding on to for me? No rebuttal came. My mother-in-law's face remained red, and her teeth clenched in frustration. I know what you were up to. You've been following me every time I leave the house, but I've also been following you when you go out. And you know what? You've been going to male strip clubs, haven't you? Multiple times a week. You needed money for your addiction. Is that true? After all the criticism you gave Susan for working at a hostess lounge, you've been spending all the money at strip clubs? My father-in-law finally spoke up. He looked at my mother-in-law intently, as if pleading with his eyes. She lowered her gaze. Well, it's true in a way. I may have gone there occasionally, but... Susan, can we see the footage from your hidden camera? When my father-in-law spoke, my mother-in-law unleashed her words as if she had been struck. There's no need for that. Having a hidden camera in the first place is despicable. But you did the same, didn't you? Mike said with a sigh. Moreover, you were the one who placed hidden cameras in the car used by all of us and secretly followed and took photos of Susan. Susan only had a camera in her own room. Which do you think is more despicable? Once again, my mother-in-law seemed at a loss for words. I went to fetch the camera in my room with my father-in-law and we checked the footage. There was Melissa stealing my belongings and my mother-in-law demanding money and coming to collect it. Everything was recorded. I am truly sorry. Once we finished watching the footage, my father-in-law apologized. Even when I told him it was okay, he wouldn't stop apologizing. Mike joined him and apologized to me as well. I screwed up. I should have stopped Mom from following you and taking photos. I let my own insecurities get the better of me. I'm sorry. He looked up with worried eyes and asked, Can I still be your husband, Susan? Of course you can. At my words, Mike finally smiled. My father-in-law demanded my mother-in-law to return the money to me and also served her with divorce papers. Despite her pleas of having no money and begging him not to leave her, my father-in-law was resolute and they ultimately divorced. She is now working full-time in order to repay me and cover her living expenses. I'm sure she doesn't have any spare time to visit strip clubs anymore. Melissa was kicked out of the house and her husband, who was still on his business trip abroad, left her as well. It didn't seem like she was particularly bothered by the divorce, perhaps because she had always been averse to being tied down by one man. On the other hand, what seemed to hit her hard was having to repay me for the numerous designer items she stole from me. She finally started working as a hostess, but not being particularly bright or street smart, she doesn't seem to be doing well. There's even talk of her turning into a sex worker to make ends meet. While I can't say for certain, it seems she's desperate to make money. As for me, I'm living happily with Mike and my father-in-law in my father-in-law's home. As expected, conversations with my father-in-law flowed smoothly. My husband would often ask to join in, maybe because he was jokingly jealous of our relationship. The three of us laugh and enjoy our time together every day.
My dad and mom will be staying with us for 2 weeks starting this weekend, my husband casually declared after returning from work. Without even bothering to ask me, he would unilaterally decide when his parents would visit, and I had reached my limit with his arrogance. Wait a minute, again? They were just here last month, weren't they? What's your problem? Are you treating my parents as if they're intruders? That's not what I meant. You're my wife, and all you need to do is make them feel welcome. My husband treats me like a housemaid. It seems like he didn't care about how I felt. I can't bear this kind of life anymore. Just because they're my in-laws, it doesn't mean that I should tolerate everything. I'm definitely going to escape from this situation. My name is Judy. I'm 30 years old. 3 years ago, I married my coworker and resigned from my job when we got married. I want you to be a full-time housewife and support family, my husband asked me, so I became a homemaker. 2 years after we got married, I became pregnant. Currently, I'm living busy days, raising our 1-year-old daughter, Alice. My husband's name is Kyle, who is also 30 years old. Recently, he seems to be in line for a promotion at his company. Due to this, he's been working a lot of overtime and weekend shifts, so we seldom have time as a family. Normally, he'd contact me if he's going to be late, but on this day, he hadn't come home even when it was 8 p.m. I became worried and texted him, but there was no response. After waiting anxiously, he finally came home just after midnight.
You're still up.
Why didn't you respond even once? I messaged you so many times.
I couldn't help it, right? I was doing overtime.
Overtime? No matter how busy you are, couldn't you at least send a single text saying, I'm doing overtime and will be late? I was worried because there was no response from you at all.
Judy, you're being overly dramatic. Stop making such a fuss just because I got home a little late.
What's with that tone? I was worried about you. It seemed my worries are not reaching him at all. Kyle just responded with the flat, yeah, sorry about that, and headed to the bathroom. He wasn't always like this. The changes in Kyle began after our daughter was born a year ago. That being said, I believe Kyle was genuinely happy about Alice's birth. Although he wasn't present during the delivery, he came to the hospital right after she was born. Both sets of parents were delighted, and I still remember how truly happy we were. The following month after Alice's birth, the in-laws came to stay with us, and they stayed for 2 whole weeks. I was exhausted, mentally and physically, from my single-handed newborn baby care, but Kyle decided to invite the in-laws without consulting me. Of course, I firmly protested. But Kyle persisted. My folks just want to see their grandchild. He didn't care about my opinions. Whenever I showed any signs of displeasure, he would respond with even more irritation. And he would always spit out the same line. Are you treating my parents like they're in your way? He said. That was the trigger. And from that point on, the in-laws began to stay at our house for 2 weeks, almost every month. While they played with Alice, they did not lift a finger to help with household chores. I was the only one who had to take care of their laundry, meals, and everything on top of looking after Alice. Kyle was often coming home late due to overtime and away working on weekends, so dealing with his parents fell entirely onto me. The additional burden was unbearable as I was already overwhelmed with taking care of Alice. Nevertheless, that day, Kyle casually announced, "Oh, by the way, my folks are coming to stay again this weekend." Wait a minute, again? They were just here last month. What, are you treating my parents like they're in the way? That's not what Anyway, you're my wife and you should host them nicely. Kyle never agreed with my opinions, and my frustrations kept piling up day by day. But thinking of my little daughter, I couldn't just leave him. At that time, all I could do was silently accept what he said. A few days later, as usual, my husband left for work, and the doorbell rang just after 10 a.m. Here they are again. Considering Kyle is at work, it would be nicer if they could at least come late in the afternoon or even in the evening. Holding these grievances within, I opened the front door. Sure enough, there stood my in-laws. Somehow I managed to force a smile. "Good morning, Father, Mother."
Hey there, Judy. Here we are again. Where's little Alice? Let me hold her right away.
Alice is in her room, but she just fell asleep.
What? She's sleeping? Then I'll hold her. Wait a minute, dear. I'm the one who should hold her first.
As they engaged in this banter, they barged into the house. They lifted Alice, sleeping peacefully in her crib, and started a tug-of-war over her. I tried to stop them. "She's sleeping!" But they paid no heed. Crying out over who gets to hold Alice, they ended up waking her up with the noise. And then, of course, Alice started crying. As soon as Alice started crying, the in-laws thrusted her back at me.
Oh, she's crying again. This kid cries all the time, doesn't she? Yeah, really? Kyle didn't cry this much. Judy, are you sure you're giving her enough love?
Of course I am. I couldn't stand their comments any longer, so I chimed in. She usually sleeps just fine. She's crying now because the two of you were shouting over her.
What? Are you trying to say it's our fault? Oh, goodness, Judy, that's a harsh thing to say. We're here trying to dote on our granddaughter, and instead of thanking us, you complain. I didn't mean to complain. It's just that now I've got a bad taste in my mouth. I'm feeling a bit peckish, too. Can you make us something? Well, I'm going to take a break. Judy, can you brew us some tea? Oh, and don't forget the cookies. Despite Alice crying at the top of her lungs, they behave just like that. If they're hungry, they could eat outside. If they want tea, they could brew it themselves. Even though I thought that in my heart, I couldn't say it out loud. I stood in the kitchen holding my sobbing daughter and catered to my in-laws' demands. For the next 2 weeks, I was busy without a break. My in-laws, and of course, my husband, didn't help with the housework at all. Eventually, I couldn't bear it anymore, and the night my in-laws left, I complained to my husband. Hey, about your parents, can't they reduce the frequency of their visits a bit? What are you talking about? You're saying you don't like my parents coming? My husband immediately retorted, and I was taken aback. It's not that I dislike it, I just think they visit too often. Plus, staying for 2 weeks, that's way too long. It's just 2 weeks, isn't it? Besides, they don't come every month. Don't complain too much. My husband sighed deeply and didn't even try to make eye contact with me. Nothing was going to be changed for the better. I thought, and I pleaded with him again. Listen to me. Seriously. I'm busy taking care of Alice, and it's tough to also take care of your parents on top of it. Kyle, you don't even help me at all, and I've got too much on my shoulders. Huh? Don't talk like my parents are a burden. They're taking care of Alice, and I can't believe you can say such a thing. Taking care? As soon as Alice cries, they push her on to me. You're always like that, Kyle, just doting on her when you're in a good mood, and you're not really caring for her. Give me a break. Do you realize who you and Alice are living off of? What? Why do you have to bring it up? I became a housewife because you wanted me to, Kyle. Shut up. Isn't it the fact that you're living off my money? Stop complaining and properly treat my parents. His loud shouting voice woke up Alice. Immediately, Alice started to cry, and he left the room with an annoyed look on his face. Why? How can he make such a face to his own daughter? It's his fault that Alice woke up in the first place, because he was shouting. Can't he help with housework and childcare just a little? I had nowhere to direct my anger and frustration, and tears welled up in my eyes. Hidden by the sound of my daughter's cries, I wept quietly. Even after that, my relationship with my husband didn't improve, and the days passed by. It had been a while. Around that time, I received a phone call from my mother who lives far away. Hello, Judy. Do you have any plans this weekend? No plans in particular. What's up? Well, actually, there's a funeral of a friend nearby. I haven't seen Alice for so long. I was thinking I'd like to visit. Really? I'd be so happy. Please come visit. Oh, I'm glad. If it's not too much trouble, could I possibly stay for one night? Of course. I'll let Kyle know. The unexpected news of my mother's visit filled me with joy. What should we eat? What should we talk about? I was filled with anticipation. But when I told my husband about my mother's visit when he got home, he returned an unexpected answer. Huh? What are you talking about? That's out of the question. Wait a minute. Why is it out of the question? This weekend, my mom and dad are coming over. We don't have room to accommodate your mother. I don't want to be bothered either. Huh? Your parents are coming again? Stop saying again. We should be grateful they're even coming. Huh? Grateful? What is he talking about? I don't see how this is something to be grateful for when it only adds to my burden. Normally, I would back down to avoid a fight, but I couldn't give in this time. I made up my mind and once again confronted him. Isn't it strange? Why is it fine for your parents but not for my mother? Huh? Well, of course the husband's parents come first. What? That's not fair. And the ratio is off. Your parents are here nearly every month, but my mother can't even come once a year? Since Alice was born, my mother hasn't seen her. Well, send her some photos or something. She doesn't need to come all the way. She's only coming because she has a funeral to attend. It's only for one night. Why do you always prioritize your parents so much? You're the worst. The words I blurted out, "You're the worst," seemed to have struck a nerve. He furrowed his brows and glared at me. You'd better watch out your attitude. I just meant just for one day we could have my mother. Enough! I'm the one paying for the rent, the groceries, all the living expenses. In other words, I get to decide who gets to come to this house. Shut up and do as I say, you parasite! At that moment, all the frustrations I had been suppressing exploded. All I asked was to host my mother for just one day. And yet, why do I have to be berated like this? And a parasite? Really? How could he say such a thing? Who does he think does all the housework while he's out making money? Enough is enough. I'll show him. It was at that moment that I decided to divorce my husband. To set an appropriate stage for it, just a little more patience was needed. I ended up explaining the situation to my mother and told her we couldn't host her. The weekend arrived and the in-laws came. My husband, unusually, had no work that day.
Thanks for hosting us again, Judy.
Is Alice awake yet? Yes, she's awake.
Oh, what perfect timing.
Let me hold her. Like always, the in-laws stormed into our house without any hesitation. My husband just sat there, grinning like a fool. While I was preparing some tea, my mother-in-law and husband approached me grinning.
Judy, we always feel bad, but since we help look after Alice like this, you must be grateful, right?
Absolutely. It's all thanks to Mom and Dad. Oh, by the way, Judy, this time they're staying for 3 weeks. That's fine. This will be the last time anyway. Upon hearing my reply, my husband and his parents let out a synchronized, "Huh?" After a moment of shock, my husband frantically asked,
Hey, Judy, what the hell are you saying? What do you mean by the last time?
I mean exactly what I said. I can't deal with you all anymore.
What? Don't joke with me. If you keep talking like that, I'll divorce you.
Fine.
What?
Here you go. I handed him the divorce papers I had filled out in advance. The color drained from Kyle's face as I thrust the papers at him.
What the hell is this? A joke, right?
Do you think I'd joke about this? I'm serious. I've told my mom, and I've decided to leave this house and go back to my parents' home.
What? I won't let you do that. We are not getting a divorce.
Even his parents joined in as I stood there in silence.
What Kyle says is right. You've been leeching off of him, and now you're acting all high and mighty. You're living off Kyle, and yet you're taking this attitude even with us.
The 3 of them started hurling insults at me one after another, but I no longer needed to endure it. They are no longer my family or anything else to me. Taking a deep breath, I let them have it.
Enough with you and your goddamn bullshit. You think just because I'm quiet, you can say whatever you want? Do you have any idea how much I've had to put up with?
It was the first time I've ever talked back like this in front of them. So all 3 of them were taken aback. Eventually, Kyle started opening and closing his mouth as if he wanted to say something, but I didn't let him and continued.
I wouldn't wish to be part of a family like yours anymore. Taking care of Alice? You're just intruding for your own satisfaction. Just holding her when she's in a good mood doesn't mean you're looking after her. Well, wait, Judy, let's calm down a bit. Shut up. Since Alice was born, how many times have you changed her diaper, fed her a bottle, bathed her? You're just messing around with her when she's in a good mood. You let your parents stay over all the time, but not my mom? That's bullshit. Why should only your parents be treated so well? I've had enough of babysitting you 3.
My outburst left the 3 of them standing there in shock. Having vented all my grievances, I grabbed my bare essentials, picked up Alice, and left the house. I then headed straight for my parents' house. I had already told my parents about the situation, so they warmly welcomed me. I ignored all the calls and emails from Kyle. If he refuses to agree to the divorce, I'm considering going for mediation. The divorce will most likely proceed on the grounds of his fault, because I discovered his affair. The woman he was cheating with was a colleague from the company where I used to work. One of my ex-colleagues who had worked at the same place as him told me about the affair and even provided photos as evidence. All his claims of working late or on weekends were lies. No wonder he gradually became distant after Alice was born. Based on the evidence of the affair, I hired a lawyer, and eventually the divorce was finalized. I was able to collect the agreed-on alimony from Kyle. Of course, I reported the affair to our company, and both my ex-husband and his mistress were fired.
Their relationship seemed to have quickly fizzled out due to this, and they parted ways. Having lost his job, and with the alimony payment creating a debt, I heard that he's now constantly being hounded by debt collectors. His parents, my former in-laws, who used to rely on him, are apparently now having a harder life than before. I don't have a shred of sympathy for them, since it's all a product of their own actions. As for me, I've been raising my daughter, with the support of my parents at our family home. There are tough times, sure, but thanks to my parents' help, we're managing to lead a peaceful life. My daughter is only a year old. There will come a day when she'll wonder about her father. When that day comes, I'll explain everything to her in words that she can understand. I plan to pour all the love I can into my daughter for as long as I can.
Grandma, can I have $10 for my allowance today? My front door swings open, and my 6-year-old granddaughter burst in with a smile on her face. Oh, Emma, you're here again. My voice is usually somber for talking to a grandchild, but it's understandable. Emma has been coming over for money 5 days in a row now. I had just returned from living abroad for 10 years, and Emma, who had only seen pictures of me as a baby, came to visit. I was initially thrilled to meet her, but her daily visits asking for money started to bother me. I called my son's house multiple times. Finally, I got a hold of my daughter-in-law and can't help but raise my voice. What kind of values are you teaching your child? She comes over every day asking for money.
What are you talking about?
I'm even more puzzled by my daughter-in-law's confused response. And then I'm shocked by the truth she reveals. I moved abroad when I was 50 due to my husband's job. At the time, we left our college-age son in New York and moved to another country. Eventually, he got a job, got married, and had a child 6 years ago. When we saw the baby pictures, we were so thrilled that we sent a ton of diapers, much to our son's dismay. After 10 years abroad, we decided to move back to New York upon my husband's retirement. I contacted my son to let him know I'd be coming back alone first. I'll be back the day after tomorrow. Can you pick me up? Sorry, I have an overseas business trip starting tomorrow. Oh, we'll just miss each other. That's too bad. I was excited about my life back in New York, even though I wouldn't see my son right away. Our house, located in a prime area, was too big to maintain, so my son and his wife didn't want to live there. We had it regularly cleaned by a service. 2 days after returning, a little girl suddenly visits.
Hello, Grandma.
Huh?
Nice to meet you. I'm Emma.
Could you be my granddaughter, Emma? The girl who somewhat resembles my son answers
Yes.
and shows me a picture of her and my son. What I saw in the photo was my son smiling and leaning on each other's shoulders, and Emma in front of me. Oh, Mark has aged. I can't help but smile at the sight of my slightly chubby son. Do you always carry this photo?
No, Mom told me to show it to you when I met you.
I suddenly realize Emma seems to be alone. How did you get here? Mark, your dad is on a business trip, right?
Yeah, but my mom dropped me off nearby. She said she had to go shopping and told me to stay here.
Emma is only 6 years old. I can't imagine letting a child this age walk alone in New York. But looking at my innocent granddaughter's face, I can't help but smile. Do you want a snack, Emma?
Yeah, yay.
I give her some snacks and juice, and she happily munches away. We spend the afternoon playing puzzles, and before I know it, it's evening. I'm preparing some cookies to send her home with when I hear,
Bye, Grandma.
And she's gone in a flash. I try to follow her, but she's already out of sight, and I don't have my daughter-in-law's phone number. I call their home that night, but no one answers. I'm worried, but the next day Emma shows up again.
Geez, Grandma, you had me worried.
Why did you leave so suddenly?
Mom came to pick me up nearby, so it's all good.
Looking at my cheerful granddaughter, I wonder if I'm just being overprotective. Emma spent the day at my house again and left on her own saying,
Mom is waiting for me nearby.
I call home, but my daughter-in-law doesn't answer. Yet Emma keeps showing up every day. After this happens for 2 days, I start to find it suspicious. Then Emma says something unexpected.
Grandma, I want an allowance.
An allowance?
Yeah, give me $5.
I'm surprised by the sudden request, but I think maybe it's a child's privilege to ask for money so straightforwardly. So I hand her $5 with a smile. However, from that day on, Emma starts asking for money every time she opens her mouth. And the amount she asks for keeps increasing. $10, $20, day by day. Do you want to buy something? If so, I can buy it for you.
No, I just want the money.
I want to give it to her, but I can't just hand it over without reason. Why do you want the money?
I just want it.
But you shouldn't just take money from people.
Why not? You're rich, right? Mom told me you have lots of money, so I can get as much allowance as I want.
What? Mom said that. Emma repeats,
Give it to me.
with sparkling eyes. One day, when I firmly said no, I found some bills missing from my wallet. I wanted to call Mark, but unfortunately he's still on an overseas business trip. After calling my son's house several times, my daughter-in-law finally answers.
Oh, mother-in-law, long time no see. Sorry, I heard you were back, but things have been hectic.
I don't care about that. What are you teaching your child? Emma comes over every day asking for money.
Emma, what are you talking about?
When I confront her saying, "Don't pretend you don't know," she replies with unexpected words.
Emma can't go to your house.
What are you talking about? She's here right now.
My daughter is in the hospital.
What? According to my daughter-in-law, Emma has been frail since birth and has been in and out of hospitals. The reason I only received baby pictures while I was abroad was that they didn't want to worry me with her frail appearance. The reason I couldn't reach my daughter-in-law was that she was at the hospital where Emma was admitted. After she hung up saying, "I have to go to the hospital now," I was stunned for a while. Who is this Emma who came to my house today? Calling me Grandma and carrying a photo of her and Mark? Emma, will you answer Grandma's question?
Yeah, sure. What?
What's your dad's name?
Mark?
And your mom's name?
Betty.
I frown at this point. The name of the dad is correct, but my daughter-in-law's name is Jennifer. I asked a few more questions, and there are slight discrepancies in all her answers. Is Mom coming to pick you up today, Emma?
Yeah.
I see. By this time, I had already made up my mind. In the evening, as Emma leaves my house alone as usual, I quietly follow her. After walking for a while, Emma enters a nearby park and runs toward a young woman waiting there. The woman at the park is a complete stranger, not my daughter-in-law, and I don't recognize her face. I hurriedly approach the two as they try to leave the park. "Excuse me, are you this child's mom?" "Yes, so?"
Who are you? This child has been asking me for money.
I whisper so the child can't hear, but the woman responds loudly. "So what? You're Emma's grandma, right? It's only natural for a grandma to give her grandchild money." "Who told you that? Mark?" "Who else would it be?" I question the smirking woman and find out she's my son's mistress, and Emma is his secret child. He even gave this secret child the same name as his daughter. What is Mark thinking? My real granddaughter is in the hospital, and my daughter-in-law is by her side. And Mark took advantage of this to have an affair and even father a child. I feel dizzy from the shock. We need to have a serious talk. "What, you're going to lecture me? It's not his fault. He won't leave his wife." "So you're extorting money from me because—" "Exactly. I need to get something out of this, but if he says he'll divorce, I'll stop." I'm still furious at Betty's arrogance. but I propose that we'll have a proper discussion when Mark returns from his overseas trip. She reluctantly agrees. 3 days later, I confirm Mark has returned and invite him to dinner at our house. Waiting for Mark, who enters the living room loosening his tie. Me, my daughter-in-law Jennifer, and his mistress Betty. What's going on? That's what Jennifer and I want to know. Mark is surprised, but I have no intention of letting up. Mark, you need to divorce Jennifer right now. Why should I? Who else has been having a long-term affair and even fathered a secret child? That's not it. There's a reason. And besides, Jennifer would never divorce me. How would she live without my income? Just as Mark starts to regain his composure, Jennifer crushes it.
No, I will divorce you. I don't need to worry about my future. I'll endure any hardship for my daughter. It's better than being married to you.
Hey, you're joking, right? Having a divorce on my record would ruin my reputation.
I don't care. Go build a wonderful family with that woman over there.
Betty, the mistress, is thrilled. Yay, you're getting a divorce. So, mother-in-law, when can Mark and I move into this big house? Unfortunately, you'll never call me mother-in-law, and living here is out of the question. Why, you're not going to approve of our marriage? Marry if you wish. I have nothing to do with it anymore. What? Mom, what are you saying? Mark, I'm cutting ties with you. Live your life as you please. My words silence the room. Everyone in the room looks shocked. A few seconds later, Betty breaks the silence with a scream. Ah! What? You've got to be kidding. What's so appealing about Mark if he's not your son, you rich old lady? What did you just say? I was with him because your parents are rich. Otherwise, why would I have a relationship with a married man? I even had a child thinking it would get me more money. It seems my son chose a terrible woman to have an affair with. Mark's face turns from pale blue to ghostly white. I thought you were a rich old lady coming back from overseas, and now this? This is a joke. I'll sue you for damages. You're quite bold, but actually you're the one who should be paying damages. You had a relationship with a married man after all. No. I didn't know he was married. Mark deceived me. Oh, didn't you just say you were with him because his parents are rich, even though he's married? I didn't say that. There's no proof. Goodness, I never thought my long stay overseas would come in handy like this. I pull out my mobile phone, which is set to record. Don't underestimate me because I'm old. I lived in a country where lawsuits are common. Recording conversations for evidence is pretty standard there. Now it's Betty's turn to go pale. She slumps down, defeated, and the next moment clings to my leg. Please pretend you didn't hear what I said earlier. Delete that recording. Why would I do that? Just pay what you owe. I can't. How much are these damages? I don't have that kind of money. Betty turns to Jennifer, pleading for forgiveness, but Jennifer quietly shakes her head. Afterwards, Jennifer divorces Mark and claims $30,000 in damages from both him and Betty. Mark also ends up paying $1,000 a month for both Emma's child support. Having been cut off by me, he loses his spirit, makes mistakes at work. Apparently, he was fired for causing great damage to the company and is now working hard at his day job. I heard Betty is somehow making ends meet working at a club. As for me, I decide to live overseas again. After discussing it with my husband, we decide to take my former daughter-in-law, Jennifer, and Emma with us. With cutting-edge treatment and perhaps the foreign air agreeing with her, Emma's health gradually improves, and she's now running around parks full of energy. I get to watch my beloved granddaughter grow up by my side, and I'm living happily ever after.
If anything happens to Mia, we're getting a divorce. While shopping with the family, our daughter Mia suddenly goes missing. In a panic, I search everywhere. Ethan, clearly annoyed, yells at me. He gives up the search and goes off to eat. At the mall's information desk, they informed me that a child matching Mia's description was seen being forcibly put into a car by a young woman in the parking lot. What should I do now? A store employee kindly suggests contacting the police. Just then, Ethan returns and after hearing the situation, urgently says, "Don't you dare call the cops." What unfolds next is unexpected and horrifying truth, plunging Ethan into a living hell. My name is Allison. I live with my 4-year-old daughter, Mia, and my husband, Ethan. I hustle every day as a homemaker, doing everything for Ethan and Mia. After graduating college, I married Ethan and became a homemaker at his insistence. Despite this, Ethan looks down on me for never having worked as a working adult.
"If you divorce me, Allison, you're done for. You have no work experience."
Ethan points this out every time we fight.
"You're just a parasite."
I've been called that too. When we first got married, I used to stand up for myself, but Ethan's constant belittling has worn down my confidence. I find myself unable to argue back anymore, merely living according to Ethan's wishes. Unhappy with the situation, I once suggested to Ethan that I could get a part-time job now that Mia has started preschool.
"If you take a part-time job, you'll neglect the household chores. Plus, you've never worked a day in your life, Allison."
But I thought I could contribute to our finances even just a bit.
"Cut the crap! You, Allison, with no skills, working? Impossible. Bring it up again and we're getting a divorce."
Ethan ripped up the resume I had started writing. Why can't things be better? The thought of a divorce crossed my mind, but with no work experience, there's no guarantee I'd get custody of Mia if we separated. So I gave up on getting a part-time job and found myself back under Ethan's thumb. Around that time, Ethan started coming home late and seemed preoccupied with sending messages, acting a bit off. Moreover, when I went to wash Ethan's dress shirts, I noticed the scent of women's perfume on them. Could he be cheating? Suspicion growing, I couldn't resist peeking at his phone while he was in the shower. But the phone was locked, and I was struggling to unlock it.
"What are you doing?"
A terrifying voice came from behind me. Turning around, I saw Ethan, freshly out of the bath, glaring at me and snatching the phone out of my hands. Well, I saw messages coming in and I got curious.
"Enough with the excuses. Do you think I'm cheating?"
No, it's not like that.
"I wouldn't do something like that. We have our lovely Mia. Think about it again and we're getting a divorce."
With that, Ethan retreated to his room, leaving me pondering. I haven't even mentioned cheating, but his defensive reaction told me all I needed to know. However, the thought of being separated from Mia if we divorced stopped me from pushing any further. The next day, Ethan oddly began to bring home flowers and our favorite cream puffs, as if trying to get back in my good graces. And perhaps to continue winning me over, he suggested we go to the new shopping mall that had recently opened nearby.
"We're both free this weekend. Let's go out, all 3 of us."
Yay, shopping with Mom and Dad!
Mia was jumping with joy. I was happy too, finally having a family outing. So, on our next day off, we drove to the new shopping mall in the neighborhood. However, the newly opened stores were extremely crowded. After some time walking around the mall, we all felt drained by the crowds.
"I'm tired. I'll take a break here with Mia."
Ethan quickly sat down at a rest spot in the mall. I gave Mia some soft-serve ice cream and decided to use that time to go grocery shopping at the supermarket next door. After 30 minutes later, when I returned to the rest spot, Ethan was lounging on a sofa absorbed in a game on his mobile phone. However, when I looked around, Mia was nowhere near Ethan. Where's Mia?
"She was just playing near the table a minute ago. Maybe she's in the restroom?"
I checked the restroom for Mia, but she wasn't there. I even searched through the nearby toy stores and arcade from corner to corner, but she was nowhere to be found. Starting to panic, I yelled, "Mia, where are you?" With the crowd, I couldn't spot her. "Hey, Mia's missing! Help me find her!" Reluctantly, Ethan, who had been engrossed in his mobile game, started searching with me. I could sense his annoyance at being interrupted. After searching for about 10 minutes, Ethan suddenly grabbed my collar.
"It's your fault for leaving Mia alone while shopping, isn't it?
You said you were watching her! Who cares? If anything happens to Mia, we're getting a divorce. What? His sudden words caught me off guard. When that happens, I'm taking custody of Mia. You can work your tail off for child support. Now is not the time to be saying that. If you don't like it, search by yourself. Ethan let go of my collar abruptly and stormed off to the food court, saying he was going to eat. Don't you care about Mia at all? Though I wanted to call him back, fearing his anger, I let him go. Unable to find Mia, I went to the mall's service counter for help. She's a 4-year-old girl wearing a red floral dress and white shoes. Unfortunately, no reports of a missing child had been made. Hearing this, I collapsed into a chair. Where could Mia be? Was she kidnapped? Is she crying somewhere right now because I'm not there? The concerned staff called around to different stores for me. Just when I was praying for any information, a security guard said he saw a girl in similar clothing being forcibly put into a car by a young woman. When he had questioned her, she had yelled, "She's my daughter, just being stubborn. I'm in a hurry, so don't bother me." She seemed quite flustered, starting the car quickly and drove off. The more I heard, the more it seemed likely that the woman had taken Mia. Mia, please be safe. Feeling guilty for leaving Mia behind while shopping, my emotions weigh heavily on me. A store staff member reassures me, "Don't worry, Mia is probably fine. Let's call the police for now." You're right. I need to call the police. Telling myself that this is no time for tears, I take out my mobile phone to call the police. Just then, I receive a call from Ethan, who seems to have just finished his lunch alone.
Hey, where are you? Did you find Mia?
The thing is, it looks like Mia was taken away in a car by a young woman.
What? What are you talking about?
I quickly tell Ethan to come to the customer service counter, and he rushes over. Ethan seems hesitant when the security guard briefs him on the situation and suggests that we should report it to the police. Then, Ethan starts asking the security guard detailed questions about the appearance of the woman who took Mia, and the color and the type of car.
I might know who she is. I'm going to call her, so please don't go to the police yet.
Know who? What do you mean?
Just stay here and wait, Allison.
Leaving me with questions, Ethan goes away to make a phone call. A few minutes later, he returns with a worried look on his face.
Allison, go home first. I'll pick up Mia, and remember, do not report this to the police.
Without explaining further, Ethan leaves in his car, so I have no choice but to take the train back home alone. Please come back safely. With no updates and time passing by, I am filled with unease. Should I really not contact the police? Then, almost 2 hours later, Ethan returns home, carrying a sleeping Mia. Mia! You're safe! Overwhelmed with joy, I run to Mia and hug her tightly. I take a peacefully sleeping Mia to her bedroom. I check her thoroughly to make sure she's not hurt, and thankfully find no injuries. I'm so relieved. Finally feeling a sense of relief that Mia is back, I ask, "So, the person who took Mia, was she someone you know?"
Yeah, it was just a mix-up with someone from work. Mia's fine. Let's leave it at that.
What do you mean, a mix-up? Explain properly.
She mistook Mia for a lost child. I don't want to make it an issue at work, okay? If you do anything weird, we're getting a divorce.
Ethan forcefully ends the conversation and retreats to his room. I don't know how you could make such ridiculous excuses. By now, I had nothing but distrust for Ethan. But what's the point in asking him any further? He won't tell me anything. Soon after, Mia woke up. I hugged Mia so tightly it might have hurt, and when I welcomed her home, she grinned with a ticklish smile.
At first, I didn't like getting in the car with a strange lady, but she told me she was Daddy's friend, so I wasn't scared.
Mia reassured me with a smile. Daddy's friend?
Yep, they're super close.
Could there be something more between Ethan and this woman? I decided to take a leap and hired a private investigator to look into Ethan. Luckily, Mia seemed fine both physically and emotionally, which was a huge relief. So life went on as usual. A week later, I received a report from the investigator. Just as I suspected, Ethan was cheating. So it's really like that, huh? Is this the same woman who took Mia? I showed the security guard at the mall a photo of the woman Ethan was seeing. It matched the woman who took Mia. When I think about it, Ethan didn't notice Mia was missing because he was gaming and then insulted me while I was searching for her. He never apologized. And the worst part? Ethan acted like he was a victim too, but all this happened because he cheated. All the anger I had for Ethan burst out. I can't leave Mia around such a father. I decided on divorce. But if it comes to divorce, I, a homemaker with no working experience, would likely lose custody of Mia. So, first things first, I started job hunting. It was tough learning how to write a resume and practicing for interviews, but I studied late into the night for Mia and finally got a job offer. Then I started working secretly from Ethan, found a divorce lawyer, and looked for an apartment I could afford. Finally, when all was ready, I went to file a police report. The day after I filed the report, Ethan came home early from work. Maybe his affair partner tipped him off. Why did you file a police report? That's a misunderstanding. Go withdraw it now. No way. What? So you're doing this because you want to get divorced? Up until now, Ethan must have thought I'd always do what he said, just because I didn't oppose him when he mentioned divorce. You know, you'd be screwed financially if we split, right? I looked at Ethan, who was brimming with confidence, and emotionlessly handed him the divorce papers. What? You do realize you won't be able to maintain this lifestyle if we divorce, don't you? You're just a homemaker. But I'm not just a homemaker anymore. I have a job and I'm earning my own money. I can live without you, Ethan. What? When did you start working? That's why I can divorce you without any issues, especially after you cheated on me with the woman who kidnapped Mia. I've told you I didn't cheat. Just as I expected, Ethan denied the cheating. So I spread out photos of him and his mistress entering a hotel. Ethan's face tightened instantly. Still want to say you didn't cheat? I'm sorry. After Mia was born, you never had time for me. I felt lonely. The first time he's ever apologized, and it was still an excuse. Ethan was running out of ways to defend himself. Look, the woman who kidnapped Mia is not my mistress. Trust me. Mia and the mall security both recognized her as your mistress. It just looks like her. She's actually a colleague. Don't let this get out, okay? Please retract the police report. Ethan was desperately trying to protect his mistress from punishment. What was he thinking? Security footage caught her license plate. It matches with your mistress's. Still think it's not her? Ethan had nothing more to say. Apparently, he'd promised his mistress to get the police report retracted. He was visibly sweating when he realized I was not going to comply this time. I don't need you, Ethan, who tries to protect someone who put Mia in danger. From now on, we'll talk through lawyers. Leaving Ethan behind, I picked up the sleeping Mia and headed to my parents' house. After that, Ethan's affair partner got arrested for kidnapping Mia. Turns out, when she expressed her sincere desire to marry Ethan, he told her, I can't marry you. Mia is important to me. Believing that getting Mia out of the picture would clear the path for marriage, she took her to a remote mountain, planning to abandon her there. When Ethan heard the description of the woman from the security guard, he realized it was his affair partner. He tricked her with a fake marriage proposal to get Mia back. Moreover, she had been bragging to her coworkers that she was set to marry Ethan, believing his words. In the end, her arrest led to everyone at work finding out about her affair and kidnapping. She was fired. As for Ethan, he resisted divorce until the end. However, thanks to the parents-in-law who felt sorry for Mia, convincing me to give up on Ethan, I secured a lump sum payment for child support and divorce settlement. Ethan wasn't put behind bars like his affair partner, but he was also fired because of the rumors she spread. And yet, I still get messages from Ethan demanding that we get back together. Always talking about how he's struggling, but never a word about me or Mia. I've decided to cut ties with the despicable Ethan once and for all. I've gone through a lawyer and even changed my mobile phone. Now, Mia and I are living together in an apartment near my parents' house. With the help of my dad and mom, I juggle work, household chores, and parenting, and I'm busier than ever. I've gained self-confidence and I'm living fuller, happier days than I did while married.
Thank you all for coming today to celebrate this special occasion with us. Growing up, I didn't have a single happy memory because I was raised by a single mom. My ex-husband chuckled next to me, clearly amused by our son's wedding speech. My son's wedding speech continues. My dad, whom I love dearly, was taken away from me. I was never told why my parents divorced. And no matter what I asked for, it was never bought for me. I don't want my future children to ever feel this way. And not wanting her to be a single mom was my ex-husband, the only one who applauded our son's speech about wanting to make his wife happy. Flashback to over a decade ago. I, Emily, chose to divorce my husband, Mason, due to his incessant cheating. Or rather, I had no other choice, because he had left me for another woman and hardly ever came back home. Our son Jackson, who was in elementary school at the time, was a daddy's boy, much to my dismay. Mason might have been a terrible husband, but he was a fantastic dad. He'd buy Jackson any toy he wanted and take him anywhere he wished to go. While I was relieved to be rid of a terrible husband, Jackson had to experience the loss of a fantastic dad, and our relationship became strained. Mason was never a big earner. Despite this, he dipped into our savings to shower gifts on his mistress and buy games for Jackson, leaving us with next to nothing after the divorce. He was estranged from his own parents, so he had almost no ability to pay alimony or child support, leaving me with very little. So I had no choice but to work full-time after the divorce. Working full-time meant I often picked up Jackson late from after-school care. He would complain, "I'm always the last one here because my mom can't come home early." "I'm sorry, Jackson. Mom is doing her best, so I need you to do your best too." "I don't want to. Why did Dad have to leave? I want to go live with him." Every time Jackson said this, all I could say was, "I'm sorry." Mason, who had once doted on Jackson, never fought for custody. He even said that Jackson would be a hindrance to his new life with his mistress. I couldn't bring myself to tell Jackson the selfishness of his dad, so I kept the reason for our divorce from him for years. Jackson, who had been spoiled by Mason, always wanted the latest trendy toys, but I couldn't afford to buy them all. I wasn't sure if it was because he liked Mason or because of how Mason raised him, but Jackson had a selfish streak. I wanted to teach him the value of patience. "Mom, I want this game. Buy it for me," Jackson would often say. "I'll get it for you on your birthday," I'd reply. Whenever I explained that I couldn't buy expensive things for no special reason, Jackson would pout and say, "Fine, Mom, I'll just ask Dad to get it for me." He'd always turn to Mason for indulgence. During their monthly visits, Jackson would ask Mason for all sorts of things, and Mason would oblige, leaving me frustrated. I was always the bad guy in this scenario. I messaged Mason, asking him to stop spoiling Jackson, but he ignored me. The man who never stopped cheating, despite my tears, wasn't going to stop just because I asked him to on WhatsApp. Jackson's rebellious phase was a nightmare. He'd go out at night, break school rules, and I lost count of how many times I had to apologize to his teachers. But as time passed, I found myself cherishing those difficult days, pouring love into raising Jackson. Eventually, Jackson became an adult and one day brought home his girlfriend, Charlotte. Charlotte was a junior colleague at my workplace. There were men in our office. They were mostly older. Charlotte often complained, "There's no one to date here." So I showed her a picture of Jackson and said, If you're interested, I can introduce you to my son." She was surprisingly keen. Jackson also had a positive reaction to Charlotte's photo. I gave them each other's contact information and left it to them. Before I knew it, they were a couple and came to our house looking serious. I was a bit anxious as I served coffee to Charlotte and Jackson. The two of them coming to the house together like this could only mean one thing. They were thinking of getting married. My hunch was right. Jackson, looking a bit shy, said, "Actually, we're thinking of getting married."
"There's a baby on the way," Charlotte added, smiling and rubbing her flat belly. I hadn't expected this, but I was thrilled. "Oh, that's wonderful!" I exclaimed, and we all celebrated by eating the cake I had prepared. Despite the challenges of raising a rebellious Jackson, I felt a sense of relief, as if my parenting journey had finally come to an end. Jackson and Charlotte wanted to have their wedding ceremony before her pregnancy became too apparent. Everything moved smoothly towards the wedding. A meeting of both families was quickly arranged, and we greeted Charlotte's parents. The meeting took place in a private room at a restaurant. Meeting Charlotte's parents for the first time, it was clear they were as warm and kind as she was. Charlotte talked about how her parents had raised her and introduced her own parents to everyone. When it was Charlotte's turn to introduce her parents, she said, mixing in some humor, "These are my wonderful parents. I hope they get along well with Miss Emily." Then it was my turn to be introduced. As I nervously wondered what would be said, Jackson pointed at me and simply said, "This is my mom." That's it. Charlotte and her parents looked stunned, but I was the most shocked of all. I had raised Jackson as a single mom, doing my best, and all he had to say was that? Feeling both sad and frustrated, I tried to lighten the mood. "I'm sorry, my son is a bit shy." Charlotte chimed in. Yes, Jackson is really shy," desperately trying to smooth things over. Jackson didn't bother to read the room and just kept eating his meal. I couldn't help but feel sad, wondering if this was how I had raised him. Then came the day of the wedding ceremony. It was a hurried affair due to Charlotte's pregnancy, but many guests came, and it felt like a good ceremony. However, I wish they had thought more about the seating arrangement. Would anyone normally seat their divorced husband, Mason, next to them? Though we had been in touch via WhatsApp, seeing Mason in person after so long was irritating. He casually said, "Hey, how have you been?" Remembering the days when I cried holding a young Jackson because of Mason's infidelity, I coldly replied, "Fine," and ignored him for the rest of the event. Mason, getting drunk, kept talking to me. "You never noticed I was cheating, even before we got married. Jackson has my genes, you know. Wouldn't it be weird if he had another woman? Are there no women among Jackson's guests?" I doubt anyone but Mason would bring up such a topic at a wedding ceremony. My irritation built up seeing Mason, red-faced and drunk, scanning the guests. But this was a celebration. For Jackson's sake, I held back my urge to yell. The ceremony proceeded without a hitch, and finally it was time for Jackson's speech. Both families stood near the exit as Jackson took a microphone from a staff member. Under the spotlight, what would Jackson say? As I waited nervously, Jackson began. "Thank you for all coming today to celebrate this special occasion with us. Growing up, I didn't have a single happy memory because I was raised by a single mom." "Excuse me?" I couldn't help but blurt out. As Mason chuckled next to me. Jackson continued his speech. "My dad, whom I love dearly, was taken away from me. I was never told why my parents divorced, and no matter what I asked for, it was never bought for me. I don't want my future children to ever feel this way." Charlotte didn't want to be a single mom. The only person who applauded Jackson's speech about marrying her to ensure her happiness was Mason. The atmosphere in the room turned icy. I looked at Mason, who had entered my field of vision with a heavy heart. Mason was smirking, saying,
Yeah, well said.
I felt a mix of anger and sadness for all that Jackson had done to me. Being disregarded during the family meeting, seated next to Mason during the wedding ceremony, and now being openly insulted. None of it was forgivable. Though I muttered to myself, "Brace yourself," as I was paralyzed by sadness and regret. The one who moved was Charlotte. Jackson's speech just now was a terrible mistake. Charlotte snatched the microphone from Jackson and pleaded desperately. "Miss Emily, Jackson's mom, is an incredible woman. She's the first woman in our company to become a department head. In fact, I had climbed the corporate ladder despite being a woman. Jackson probably didn't know because he never cared about my career."
Department head? Mom is?
Jackson's surprised voice was drowned out by my subordinates, led by Benjamin, who stood up.
Yes, Miss Emily treats everyone fair and is an amazing boss. She never had a day when she didn't think about her son, Jackson, even while raising him.
Benjamin, who had worked with me for years, knew I had juggled work and parenting. I was deeply touched that he valued my efforts. Charlotte glared at Jackson and said through the microphone, "I will divorce Jackson."
What? Why?
"Because someone who doesn't appreciate or even try to understand his mom's efforts can't be trusted to value a wife and a child. Being a single mom doesn't mean the child will be unhappy. That's just your misconception. I will return all the congratulatory gifts we received today. I apologize for the inconvenience after you've all come this way." Someone said,
Well said.
and applause followed. Jackson looked bewildered, his face pale, while Charlotte stood tall and looked stunning. Guests began to leave the wedding venue, and Mason had also disappeared. Left behind were just me and Charlotte's parents. Charlotte's dad was red-faced with anger. When I said, "I apologize for Jackson," he kindly replied,
You have nothing to apologize for.
Charlotte said, "Let's go." And we left the wedding venue. Jackson was left in the lobby shouting,
Why is this happening?
He looked pitiful and miserable. Charlotte and Jackson did end up divorcing. Jackson had already moved in with Charlotte and initially planned to return to my house, his childhood home. However, I had moved without telling him, leaving him without a place to go. A troubled Jackson called me.
Mom, where are you? I can't just lose my childhood home like this.
"Jackson, have you ever had a happy moment being raised by me? If not, there's no point in living together now. I won't tell you where I am."
Don't say that, Mom. Living alone is lonely.
His voice sounded like he was about to cry. I wavered, but remembered his speech and decided we shouldn't live together. "You loved Dad, right? Go live with Mason. It's better if you stay out of my life for your own happiness."
Mom, wait. That speech was just a joke.
I didn't raise a son who would make such a joke at a moment like that. Goodbye. Take care. After hanging up, I blocked Jackson's number. Cutting ties with my son was sad, but I felt somewhat relieved after all the terrible things he'd done to me. I heard from Mason that Jackson took my advice and visited him. Mason, who had just broken up with his girlfriend, welcomed Jackson. But two selfish people living together couldn't last long. Mason would get drunk every night and insult Jackson, leading to nightly arguments. Mason even borrowed money from Jackson's wallet and gambled it all away, causing Jackson to storm out. Mason said,
I don't need a tight-fisted son like that. After all I've bought for him, he makes a fuss over a little money.
So it's unlikely Mason will help Jackson in the future. I don't know where he is now, but it seems he's truly alone. In contrast, I was enjoying my life. Charlotte often visited with her newborn, Ava. "Please teach me how to be a single mom," Charlotte said. The first lesson is not to raise a selfish son like that, I replied, and Charlotte laughed. I think of Ava as adorable and Charlotte as a daughter. I've continued to interact with Charlotte's parents, and we've even gone on short trips together. Parenting is harder than I thought. You're amazing for doing it alone, Miss Emily, Charlotte often says. I simply reply, thank you, without any false modesty. If I downplayed it, I'd be negating all the hard work I'd put in back then. The efforts that neither my husband nor my raised son acknowledged. I might as well acknowledge them myself. Watching Ava grow little by little alongside Charlotte has become one of my joys in life, and I feel truly happy about it.
Hello? Hey, how many times do I have to tell you? Keep the noise down when you open and close the door. What? I'm sorry. Was it really that loud? If it wasn't, I wouldn't be calling, would I? Seriously? How many times do I need to repeat myself? The call was abruptly ended. Despite the brief exchange, it was utterly draining. How many times had I had this same conversation with our next-door neighbor? My family and I aren't trying to be loud. My name is Leone, 37 years old. I work in sales administration for a medical equipment company. My husband Larry is on a solo assignment overseas, so it's just my 13-year-old son Steve and me at home. We live in an older apartment, but the location is great, so we love it. But there's one recent problem. A woman who moved in next door keeps lodging complaints against us. Even this weekend, the doorbell rang repeatedly, and I approached it with trepidation. How many times do I need to tell you to be quiet when you open and close the door? I'm really sorry. I wasn't trying to slam it. That's not my problem. Just be considerate, alright? Seriously. She just yelled and left. Her name is Dina. She's a housewife in her 40s with a high school-aged child. I remember feeling a bit intimidated by her sharp gaze when we first met. As I expected, the aggressive complaints are non-stop, especially on weekends. I told you not to stomp around in your apartment. It's so disruptive. I'm sorry. I'll be more careful. Come on. It's not just you living here. I genuinely believe we aren't causing any noise disturbances. Of course, my son Steve is a quiet kid, probably even quieter than the other units. In reality, I secretly think Dina's place is way more of a nuisance. Her high school-aged daughter, Vivian, loves blasting her music, and the sound leaks terribly. Even Dina's phone conversations are so loud they penetrate our walls, yet they turn a blind eye to their noise, while always pointing fingers at us. Especially in an old apartment, it's essential to be considerate of each other. It's bad enough when she rings the doorbell, but it's genuinely terrifying when she bangs on our front door. Your conversation is too loud. Please lower your voice. Yes, I'll be careful. Sorry. You know my legs are bad. It's already a hassle just to come out here. I see. So don't make me come to your door every time. Just give me your cell phone number. Okay. From that day on, the complaints started coming over the phone. I deeply regretted giving out my number on impulse. No matter if it was a weekday or a weekend, she didn't care. Turn down the TV! I can faintly hear it and it's driving me crazy. Yes, sorry. Is this volume okay? Keep all the noises down to this level. Seriously. I heard from the landlord that Dina's husband is also working away from home. We're in a similar situation. We should get along better, but the complaints and demands from Dina just escalated. The vacuum is too noisy. What kind are you using? Replace it. I just got a new one last week. It's supposed to be quiet. Ugh, it doesn't sound quiet. At least vacuum on Sunday mornings when I'm out shopping. With our relationship being like this, there's no way our kids would get along. One day, when Steve sneaked back into the house. What happened, Steve? Did someone chase you? I don't want Vivian from next door to see me. She might get rough. Rough? Did she do something to you? She's too hands-on, and she tries to get me to buy her soda with my allowance. Vivian doesn't have a great reputation. I've heard she hangs out with a group of self-centered, troublesome kids. The day after hearing that rumor, when I returned from work, Steve was sitting near our apartment entrance, hugging his knees. Steve? What happened? You can't stay out here. Yeah, I'm sorry. I lost my keys. From what he told me, Vivian and her friends confronted him on his way home from school. They dragged him to a nearby park, making him play games he didn't want to. They took things from my pockets, threw my stuff around. Oh my god! As Steve recounted, tears welled up in his eyes. For the high schoolers, it might have been just a pastime, but for Steve, it must have felt like torture. When he realized he'd lost his keys, how devastated he must have felt. He probably searched the park over and over. He must have felt so alone and scared. I couldn't contain my anger. I rushed outside and furiously rang Dina's doorbell. When Dina appeared, her eyes were cloudy. She had already been drinking. What's up? My kid told me they had a run-in with your Vivian. Really? Kids will be kids, you know. Stop making a fuss about it. I won't let this go. Ensure she doesn't bother my child again. She briskly closed the door after speaking her mind. I heard Dina shouting something, but I didn't want to hear it. From that point on, our relationship with Dina became even more strained. She began banging on our shared wall and tossing trash on our balcony. Talking to the apartment manager didn't seem to help. Dina wouldn't change her behavior. This is quite a predicament, sighed the apartment manager, scratching his head. I've had similar complaints about her. I've told her not to disturb the peace here, but it doesn't get through. She sure doesn't take advice well. If the apartment manager can't get through to her, what chance do I have? I guess her husband's away on business? Maybe she's just lonely, the manager pondered. But that's no excuse to hassle the neighbors. True, it's not right. I'll talk to her again. Is she so lonely with her partner away that she's resorting to making complaints and drowning her sorrows in alcohol? If that's the case, it's genuinely heartbreaking. But I can't fathom dealing with stress in such a way, yet Dina's complaints continued relentlessly. Even when we thought we were quiet, she'd always find something to nitpick. Thanks to her, we never got a moment of peace. The thought that the constant complainer next door might be eavesdropping kept us from even laughing freely. Recently, there have been loud knocks on our front door in the evenings. When we checked the security footage, it appeared to be Vivian's doing. The knocking continued until the apartment manager threatened to evict her. With such overwhelming stress, day in and day out, both Steve and I were totally drained. One day, I phoned my husband Larry, who was overseas, to fill him in on the situation. It's just, I can't believe, of all people, she moved next door. Is that what's been happening? How about Steve? Any more issues with the girl next door? I think it's better now. Probably thanks to the apartment manager laying down the law. We've told Steve to consult the property manager in emergencies, like if he loses his key. I felt guilty burdening Larry with this while he was on a work trip abroad. Being away, he might worry even more, but I had to share my feelings. I felt like I'd fall apart if I didn't talk to someone. That's when Larry spoke up. If you're feeling down, maybe you should take a break to de-stress? De-stress? My business trip will be over soon, right? Work's been easing up. I have some free time now. Are you suggesting... Yeah, what do you think? It's a great place here. A few days after that conversation, my cell phone rang. It was from Dina. I wondered what was going on and answered. Hey, how many times do I have to tell you? The noise from the kids is too loud. Do something about it. What? Kids? Yes, think about the neighbors. Fix this, now. Dina sounded slurred. Probably drunk. She kept shouting without really hearing me. Trying to calm her down and get her to focus was a challenge. Please listen. I'm currently abroad with my child. What? I'll hang up for a moment and contact the apartment manager. Panicking, imagining the worst, my hands trembled as I operated my phone. Fortunately, the apartment manager answered right away. Hello? Oh yes, it's about apartment 302. Yes, that's right. Maybe... The apartment manager had noticed something odd about my place almost at the same time I did. He found it strange that the lights were on even though I was supposed to be on a trip. He assured me he'd call back once he figured things out. About 30 minutes later, the news from the apartment manager was pretty much as I feared. The apartment was swarming with police officers, and we had no choice but to return home immediately. When my child and I arrived back at the apartment, both the apartment manager and Dina were there to greet us. Dina looked utterly defeated. I'm so sorry for what my daughter did. Right. It was Vivian and her friends who had broken into our apartment and created chaos while we were away. After Steve had been harassed by Vivian and her crew, he realized he lost his key. Turns out Vivian had stealthily taken the key from Steve's belongings. Sometime after that, Vivian got wind that we'd be away from our apartment for a long time. She might have overheard my conversation with the apartment manager. Seeing us leave for our trip, she and her friends seized the opportunity to sneak in. They partied so hard that eventually a police officer had to step in. Our apartment was a mess. Vases and mirrors were shattered, wallpaper torn, and graffiti was everywhere. There were discarded candy wrappers, instant noodle cups, juice cartons, and plastic bottles all over. The police officer had instructed that everything be left as it was until we returned. Seeing the state of the apartment, forgiveness wasn't an easy option. Regardless of it being a child's mischief, there were clear boundaries crossed. I'm so sorry. I'll help clean up. Thank you. I'll pitch in too. We immediately began tidying up. Apart from essential communication, I hardly spoke to Dina. I wasn't the kind to get chummy after such an incident. She sensed that and focused solely on cleaning. After a while, the parents of the other kids who had trespassed along with Vivian arrived. Each one of them apologized profusely. I accepted their apologies sincerely. A police officer arrived around the same time and updated us on the details. When the police arrived, there were 4 girls in the apartment, including Vivian. All of them stopped their antics and sat down properly after a stern warning from the apartment manager. All 4 of them are over 18, so they can be held criminally responsible. I was told that the 4 of them were currently detained at the local police station. Whether they'd remain in custody would be up to the prosecutor and the judge. I had spoken to the authorities, emphasizing that these were just kids, most of them still in school. Being arrested and detained is traumatic for anyone, especially for the young ones. I believed they shouldn't face harsh penalties. The discussion shifted towards settling things outside the courtroom. The apartment manager would assess the damages for broken windows, mirrors, and wallpaper. All I had to decide was the compensation for the damages and my emotional distress. The bill would go to Vivian's mother, Dina. The financial burden would be shared equally among the 4 families, each reimbursing Dina. By the time our negotiations and cleanup were wrapping up, I saw a large black van pull into our complex. A tall, imposing man and Vivian stepped out. Could it be? My hunch was right. The man was Dina's husband. He had a strong and commanding presence, and didn't seem like someone from a traditional office job. He seated both Dina and Vivian next to him, and turned to me. We sincerely apologize for all the trouble my reckless wife and foolish daughter have caused. He repeatedly expressed his regret, almost to the point where I felt embarrassed. I lost count of how many times I told him it was okay and to stop apologizing. Dina and her crew left shortly after, continuously apologizing. 2 days later, Dina and Vivian moved out. I initially thought it was just the movers, but when I checked, Dina told me she was moving in with her husband. I had been reluctant because his new job is in a very rural area, and I didn't want to go, she said. But after the recent mess, she didn't feel right staying here. She decided to join her husband. If this ordeal brought their family closer together, then perhaps it was for the best. As a wife with a husband on a solo assignment, I genuinely felt that way. I sincerely hoped that living with her strong-willed husband would keep Dina on the straight and narrow, and that Vivian might mature a bit. A few days after that, with my windows and walls back in pristine condition, my husband Larry returned from his trip. My son, Steve, and I went to the airport to greet him. Larry's overseas assignment was over, and our family of 3 was together again. I wouldn't have to face any more unsettling nights alone for a long time. The recent events reminded me of the importance of having family close. Life is truly better when we're all under the same roof. That was my heartfelt realization.
I woke up in a hospital bed. Supposed to be on my way home from shopping. Why? Where am I? The nurse explained to me what happened. Apparently, I was rear-ended by a car and urgently transported to the hospital. Then my husband, who rushed to the hospital, blurted out, "Why are you still lying on the bed? Let's go home. Get discharged now and make my dinner. If you can't fulfill your wife's duties, I'll divorce you." What? I couldn't believe what I just heard. Who says that to their bandaged up wife? Unbelievable. I lost all my feelings for my husband, who didn't seem to care about me at all. Understood. Then I started preparing to leave my husband. My husband was certain I, a housewife, couldn't possibly divorce him. Little did he know he'd be the one struggling if I brought up divorce. My name is Lisa. I became a housewife after marrying my husband Daniel. It was Daniel's wish that I became a housewife. I never disliked my job, and all my hard work had started paying off, putting me in an important position. There were even talks of a promotion and the next personnel reshuffle. But when I told Daniel about the promotion, he immediately said, "I want you to become a housewife after we get married. We can get by on my salary if we save. I want you to take care of the house." Overwhelmed by Daniel's passion, I quit my job. My coworkers and bosses were disappointed, but it was also important for me to live in the same direction as a couple. As soon as I quit my job, Daniel started to insist, "I'm superior because I'm the breadwinner in this household. You won't be able to live without me. Remember that." Looking back, Daniel probably insisted on me quitting because he was troubled by the prospect of me earning more than him after the promotion that I was supposed to get. Despite this, I devoted myself to supporting Daniel's work and making the house comfortable for him. I took care of the nutritional balance of our meals, researching easy-to-eat menus, while considering Daniel's work schedule. I also made sure to do the cleaning and laundry perfectly, so that Daniel, who came home tired, could spend time comfortably. Yet it seemed like Daniel just couldn't resist complaining about my work. "Hey, tonight's dinner was a bit bland." I explained my reason to my husband, who complained. "You've had a lot of late-night work parties lately, right? I thought your stomach might be tired, so I made it a mild flavor. I should have added a good amount of broth, though." Is that so?" Despite his complaints, Daniel gradually stopped grumbling because I would refute him. Over time, he started to come home later and later. He began to come home every night smelling like women's perfume. "Hey, you seem to have been working late a lot lately. Is work getting busy?" In response to my question, he replied, "Yeah," looking annoyed. "You've also been drinking more often before coming home. How's your health? Are you okay?" Thinking that taking care of my husband's health is also part of a wife's role, I couldn't help but ask various questions. Daniel responded to me in an irritated manner. "Enough already. I have a lot going on at work. What exactly are you doing during the day?" "What do you mean by what? Various housework?" "That's why I'm asking you to be specific." My husband started to ask for a detailed schedule of what I was doing when he wasn't home. "Hey, what are you going to do today?" "I plan to do the laundry and cleaning in the morning and go grocery shopping in the afternoon." When are you going to be back from shopping? I can't say for sure. Maybe around 4 o'clock? Okay, got it. Don't be later than 4. I'm going to call home to check on you. Why would you do that? To make sure you're not slacking off on your housework. Daniel started to manage my schedule down to the hour. That day my shopping took longer than expected, and I was rushing home on my bicycle. It was already past 4 o'clock. I need to hurry back home or Daniel will get mad at me again. In my hurry, I didn't notice the car approaching from behind. The next moment, I felt an impact on my back. Before I knew it, I found myself lying in a hospital bed. Attempting to sit up, I felt pain throughout my body. A nurse, noticing my consciousness, hastily called for a doctor. Oh, you're awake. You were hit by a car from behind, the doctor explained. According to him, I was rear-ended by a car when I was riding my bike, fainted unconscious from the impact, and an ambulance took me to the hospital. Fortunately, there was no bleeding, I didn't hit my head, and I only got full-body bruises. Though my body was in pain, there were no fractures that could lead to lasting damage, and I was told I could be discharged in a few weeks. Relieved, I checked my phone and saw a slew of missed calls from Daniel. Oh, I need to call Daniel. He must be worried sick. Hearing my muttering, the nurse quickly said, I've already notified your husband. Unfortunately, he couldn't pick up the call, so I left a message on his voicemail. I might have made him worry, though. Your wife was in a car accident and has been urgently transported to our hospital. That's what the nurse had left in her voicemail. I thanked the nurse and quickly called my husband. Hey, Daniel, it's me. Lisa, what the hell are you doing not coming home? Didn't you listen to the voicemail? There was a message saying I'm in the hospital. I did listen to the voicemail. You're awake now, right? So you can come home, can't you? That's not possible. I was in a car accident. I'll be staying in the hospital for a few weeks. You're being hospitalized? What? It seemed Daniel had assumed that my injuries weren't serious. Upon hearing about my hospitalization, he said, I'm coming right now, and hung up. An hour later, Daniel burst into my room. Lisa! Just as I felt relieved at seeing my husband, his next words left me frozen. How long are you going to lie there? Let's go home. What? Go home? What on earth are you saying? I couldn't hide my confusion as I responded to my husband. I can't go home on the day of the accident. Just because it was an accident doesn't mean you're knocking on death's door. You're able to talk like this, so you're fine. Discharge yourself immediately and make my dinner. Can't you see these bandages? How do you expect me to cook in this state? You're overreacting with this hospital stay. I bet if I hadn't come to fetch you, you'd just be lazy laying on the bed. Here I am, worn out from work, and you won't even cook dinner. That's unacceptable as a wife. Look, the hospital says I need to stay for a few weeks. It's not about being lazy, it's about getting necessary treatment. Use any excuse you want, but if you think I'll let you off the hook for housework, you're wrong. If this isn't working for you, I'm okay with getting a divorce. That's ridiculous. I can't possibly do housework in this state. Well then, divorce it is. Daniel seemed to care more about having his housework done than the fact I'd been in a car accident. I felt I'm falling out of love with him quickly. Having discovered his true feelings, I made up my mind on the spot. All right. Hearing this, Daniel smirked, seemingly victorious. That's right. You should understand that my word is law. Seeing me still not trying to move, Daniel started to lose his patience. Hey, how long are you going to keep lying around? Start getting ready to leave. Just as Daniel tried to forcibly get me up, the doctor entered the room. What on earth do you think you're doing? I was just about to take her home. Upon hearing Daniel's response, the doctor became livid. What nonsense! There's a thorough examination scheduled for tomorrow, so she's not allowed to leave. Hearing this, Daniel scoffed at me. If there's an examination, then I'll wait 2 or 3 days. I'll stay at my parents' house in the meantime, so make sure you're home by then. As Daniel left the room, I watched him go with a cold gaze. Then I called my lawyer. I didn't have a single shred of affection left for him. Hello, I would like to proceed with that matter. From the hospital bed, I continued making a few more phone calls, steadily preparing. 3 days later, Daniel called my cell. Lisa, why the hell aren't you home yet? Are you back home from your parents' house? At my next question, he grumbled, Yeah, I am. The examination's over, isn't it? Then stop lounging around and get back to the chores that have piled up. Daniel didn't even bother to ask me about the medical test results. He doesn't seem to care about his wife's health one bit. My decision was definitely the right one. Daniel, you've been staying at your parents' place all this time, right? I asked him calmly. I told you already, didn't I? So what? Did you happen to check the mail sent to your parents' house? Mail? What on earth did you send? Divorce papers. In fact, I had a lawyer send the divorce papers, already signed by me, to Daniel's parents' house. Divorce papers? Why are you surprised? You were the one who said let's get a divorce, weren't you? With that, Daniel sighed as if mocking me. I never thought you were that stupid. Do you think you can live on your own after divorcing me, who provides for you? I can't start doing house chores right after the accident. I need to take better care of my health. That's why I decided to divorce you. You think you can make a living after divorcing me? You rushed into this decision. Daniel laughed out loud and then hung up the phone. But Daniel didn't know what he would face next. The next day, his parents rushed to the hospital in a panic. Lisa, our son has done a terrible thing. The moment they entered my hospital room, my in-laws bowed their heads in apology. I calmly addressed them. No, it's not your fault. You're right. The person who needs to apologize is Daniel himself. My father-in-law immediately called Daniel. Daniel, come to the hospital immediately. He didn't understand what was going on, but hearing his father being so serious, he arrived in my room within minutes. Dad, what's going on? Why'd you call me here? Daniel complained, only to be berated by his father on the spot. Don't be stupid. You caused a mess. Apologize to Lisa right now. What? What are you talking about? My father-in-law, holding out the envelope I had sent to Daniel's parents, retorted. This letter, which was delivered to our house. Hearing this, Daniel began to laugh with an air of confidence. Oh, the divorce papers. Lisa went and took my threat to divorce seriously and sent me the papers. She wouldn't be able to live without me, yet she's acting so foolishly. The problem is this document here. My father-in-law took out a bill for consolation money from the envelope. Upon seeing it, Daniel's face turned pale. What? Consolation money? Lisa was the one who sent me the divorce papers. Why should I be the one to pay consolation money? She abandoned her duties as a wife, checks herself into a hospital, and I'm the one who owes consolation money? Enough with all this. With suppressed anger, my father-in-law pulled out photographs and a report from the envelope. These are the evidence of your cheating, and here's the investigator's report. Looking at these, there's no doubt you're in the wrong. I can't believe what you've done. Seeing the photos and the report, Daniel, pale-faced, asked me, Lisa, when did you manage to get all this? That's right. I had started to suspect Daniel's cheating when he began coming home late. Claiming it was for work, he would come home every night with the scent of women's perfume. At first, I thought he was just drinking at places frequented by women. But when I sneakily checked his credit card statement, I found that he was going to trendy restaurants featured in the media, and even buying popular brands of products loved by young women. It was obvious he was spending it on dates with another woman. It was clearly cheating. Perhaps thinking I hadn't noticed, he slowly began increasing the frequency of his affairs. He seemed to be finding opportunities in between his outdoor work hours, even during weekdays. The detailed checks on my daytime activities were also so he could avoid running into me at his meeting locations with another woman. Still, I believed that he would return to me someday. However, Daniel trampled all over these feelings of mine, not showing a shred of concern for me after the accident, treating me like a maid. At that moment, I decided to exact my revenge on him. As soon as Daniel left the hospital room, I contacted my lawyer. I asked him to send the signed divorce papers and the bill for consolation money, which I had prepared in advance, to Daniel's parents' house. Knowing him, he's probably spending time with his mistress instead of going home to his family. My guess was spot on. Unlike my husband, my in-laws are upright people. They'd never approve of their son's cheating. Sure enough, upon receiving my letter, my father-in-law and his wife were quick to rush to my hospital room. Having learned everything, Daniel stated in a daze,
"So, Lisa, you knew about my cheating all along?"
"Yes, of course." I looked at my husband with icy eyes. "If you are coming home smelling like women's perfume, lavish your mistress with your credit card, it's so obvious it would be strange if I didn't notice. Plus, all your phone notifications were visible to me, so I knew exactly when and where you were meeting your mistress. Thanks to that, it was easy to gather evidence."
I'm sorry. I was just tempted. I wasn't serious about the divorce. I thought you would come back home right away."
Even if you weren't serious, I am. I don't want to continue a marriage with a husband who doesn't even worry when his wife has an accident and tries to make her do household chores. You were having fun with your mistress while I was hospitalized, weren't you?
Hold on, calm down. You're a housewife, right? You wouldn't be able to make a living if you left me. Don't be stubborn, just let the past be water under the bridge.
Excuse me? There's no way I can just let it slide. And I became a housewife because you wanted me to. If I get divorced, I'll start working right away. I won't rely on you anymore.
Start working right away? How long do you think it's been since you quit your job? Your previous company has definitely found your replacement by now.
Do you think I've just been doing housework for these past years? I've been continuously studying business in my spare time. I've got a few ideas piled up, so I could probably propose several projects now.
It's not that easy. The economy is down everywhere. Even I, who's been working all the while, can't get a promotion easily.
Isn't that because you're incompetent at work? A person who dates their mistress while outdoor work hours, I think the problem is more than just being capable or not.
What? What would you know?
I think I know more than you do. In fact, when I approached my former company, they said they wanted me to come back under the same conditions as before.
The same conditions? You'd be earning more than me.
Yes, indeed. It was all for nothing, even though you were the one who encouraged me to become a housewife and quit my job. If you didn't want to be overtaken by your wife's salary, maybe you should have tried harder instead of pulling me down.
Hold on, if that's the case, you don't need the consolation money, right? Please withdraw your consolation money claim.
Excuse me? There's no way I'm withdrawing it. This consolation money is to make up for the crime you committed. You can't just cheat on your wife and ignore her without facing any penalties.
I'm sorry. I really regret it. Please forgive me.
I will never forgive you. It's not enough to just say you're sorry. You need to show it with your actions. Go to hell. Daniel was unconvinced, but in the end, my in-law stood up for me and he finally agreed to the divorce and the payment of consolation money. After paying the consolation money, Daniel seemed to have continued his relationship with his mistress without learning his lesson. However, it seems his company found out about his frequent dating during outdoor work hours, and he ended up getting demoted and having his salary cut. To top it all off, it seems that Daniel, who had almost run out of savings due to his consolation money payment, was promptly dumped by his girlfriend. News about the cause of his divorce and his demotion spread throughout the company, and I heard that he completely lost his place there. On the other hand, I was able to be discharged from the hospital safely without any after effects from the accident. I used the consolation money I received to move, and now I'm leisurely settling into my new home. My work after returning is going smoothly, and life has been going better since the divorce. That accident may have been a good catalyst for the divorce. I decided not to look back at the past and strive forward to a new life.